Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Jeune, at the real Jon Jeune _FF. And you know the vibes. It is the Week 4 Fantasy Football Matchup Show, 7:01 a.m. Eastern right now, Friday, September 26th. So, y'all, Week 4 is upon us, and we're getting into the thick of it, right? You guys are, in the midst of finding out what you guys have, what we all have in terms of our fantasy teams, in terms of these players, who to play, when to play them, the matchups, all that stuff. So it's fun times right now, right? And I'm sure everybody is hoping to, obviously make it all the way to the fantasy playoffs. But it's going to take persistence, right? Your team is good right now. You can't, rest on your laurels. You got to keep finding depth, keep building the back end of your roster, keep trying to make trades. Don't get complacent. If you are on the opposite end of that, right, your team is constantly seems to be underperforming. Maybe you're 0-3 so far. All of these types of things. I think that there's something to be said about persistence, and especially when it comes to fantasy football, it's so easy to be like, oh, my team is 0-3, my team sucks, I don't care anymore, right? And that something that people often go through, and it's definitely okay, especially if it's your first time playing fantasy. But there are some things I would ask you to take a look at. If you are 0-3, right, or even if you're 3-0, right, this is good practice for you as well. Go to that points for column in the league standings and go ahead and sort that thing and see where you're at, right? Because if you're 0-3, but you've got you're top 5 in points scored, your team is good. You just had some bad luck, right? So staying with it, still trying to improve, still staying in the game, there's a chance for you to turn that around. Now, if your team is 3-0 and you are outside the top 6, top 7 in points for, you've got lucky. You've gotten lucky a few times. And you know what? I'd rather be lucky than unlucky. But that also doesn't mean that you just can't try to improve your roster and that your team is good, right? So just make sure, see where you are relative to the rest of the league. And, it should be a thermometer, a barometer for where you're at in terms of those points, right? So take a look at that and just keep going, just keep it up. All right. You never know what's going to happen, right? So, yes, like I said, it is the Week 4 Fantasy Football Matchup Show. So without further ado, let's kind of jump right into it. But, as we often do, let's recap what happened last week. Sorry, I'm messing around with I don't know, my settings got messed up over here. I'm not really sure why. It's kind of bothering me right now. So I'm going to stay focused on the task at hand. If you're not watching on YouTube or Spotify video or X or Instagram, wherever you're watching, if you're not watching on that, then you're just listening, then you have no idea what I'm talking about. If you are watching, then you have an idea what I'm talking about, and you see the displays changing, because I'm not gonna lie, guys, it's really bothering me. Anyway, I'm gonna stay focused, Let's stay locked in, just like you should when it comes to your fantasy teams in this season. So let's jump into the accountability from the week before. This is week 4 fantasy football matchup show. So as we always do, we're looking at wide receivers, running backs inside or outside that top 20, and we're looking at quarterbacks, tight ends inside or outside that top 10. And last week we gave out 17 plays, recommendations, if you will. And we had 6 of those guys beat their ECR by 10 spots or more. We had 2 of them beat their ECR outright. We had 2 not hit their ECR, and then we had 6 miss their ECR by 10 spots or more. So it was a so week. Some of the really nice hits in there, like Carson Wentz, Jon Jenkins, Devontae Smith, Chris Olave, George Pickens, Ricky Pearsall. All those guys ended up being big hits, being their ECR by 10 spots or more. And we have Bo Nix, who he actually was a reverse, right? We said he was in the top 12. No, that's not right. He couldn't be in the top 12. Was he in the top 12? That doesn't seem right. I have to go back and look at that. He must have been top 12 because I typed it here. But anyway, he finished outside. He finished as the quarterback 16. We had Tony Pollard. He was the quarterback 22, and the running back 22. He finished as the running back 16. So just beating his ECR and getting inside that top 20. When we look at the misses on that side, though, we had Rashad White, missed his ECR by 10 spots or more. Ramondre Stevenson, so did Harold Fanning Jr., Deebo Samuel, Wan'Dale Robinson, Diami Brown, but he did leave that game with a shoulder injury. Kyle Pitts, he just missed his ECR. Jared Goff, he just fell short of his ECR as well. And then Daniel Jones, we actually got a tie with Danny Dimes there, Indiana Jones, I guess, as they call him now. But he was the quarterback 11 and coming into the week, and he finished as the quarterback 11. So, yeah. Let's move on to this week's matchups, though. So, I fixed it. Nice. Sorry, guys. I was still messing around with it. I had to. It's the ADHD, the OCD, all of it. Just I had to. Anyway, shout out to my folks, mental health awareness. Yeah. All right. Let's jump into the matchups. Let's get right to it. We've got the 9:30 game in Ireland. Minnesota Vikings taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to go back to the Wentz well here. He's Carson Wentz, Minnesota quarterback. He's ranked as a quarterback 25 in expected consensus rankings, or expert consensus rankings, I should say. And he, after a QB1 performance last week, he's in a great spot here against Pittsburgh defense, allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks here. So, look, Wentz, he came through for us last week. Trusting him to come through for us here again this week. Like the matchup that he's in. And, again, just love the offense that he's in. Kevin O'Connell. Jordan Addison is back. Justin Jefferson, obviously. So, yeah, nice spot here for Carson Wentz to continue bringing back some, low-end QB1, high-end QB2 type performances here. All right, moving on to Cleveland against Detroit. Let's go with Cleveland running back Quinshon Judkins. He's the ECR PPR running back 27. And look, I understand what Judkins doesn't have. He doesn't have the highest ceiling, and I get that. But what he's had the last 2 weeks is volume. In week 3, he was second in the entire NFL in running back rush share, behind only Saquon Barkley, with a 94.7% running back rush share. All right. So he saw 95, almost 95% of the team running back rush attempts. And also because that their quarterback is Joe Flacco, and I guess they didn't involve any of the receivers in the run game. That 94.7% actually was the team rush share as well for him. So he's not going to see the pass game work, that we typically want to see from these higher end running backs. But if Cleveland can keep this game close here against Detroit with that elite defense that they have of their own, then Judkins should stay involved here and could have an even bigger day if he finds the end zone here. And next up is the Carolina Panthers and the New England Patriots. And so we go from one second-round pick running back out of Ohio State to another. As we talk about New England running back Travion Henderson, he's the ECR PPR running back 30. This is a vibes play right here. Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson each had a fumble in week 3. So not crazy to think that the second-round pick here will see more playing time, more touches, more opportunities against a Carolina run defense that's middle of the road in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs the last 3 weeks. Next up, we've got New Orleans wide receiver Chris Olave as the Saints take on the Buffalo Bills. Now, look, Olave is the ECR PPR wide receiver 25. And this is 4 straight weeks of Chris Olave being in this spot here for us. And maybe I don't need to be talking to you all who are listening, and maybe I should be talking to the people that are, the experts that are doing the rankings. But, he is higher ranked this week than any of the previous 3 weeks, but it's still not inside the top 20. So, we're going to keep bringing him up as long as that's the case, right? He's got the target share is nice, and an offense that throws the ball at, a higher clip than, a lot of other offenses. So again, his slice of the pie is much. He's getting he's getting a pretty large slice of a pretty large pie. So, Chris Olave, a ton of targets. The yardage is been mostly underwhelming. But if you're in a PPR league and you got a guy that's out there seeing double-digit targets every week, that's you just follow the volume there. Staying in this game, let's talk about Buffalo wide receiver Keon Coleman. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 44. Coleman hasn't been as productive the last 2 weeks since his week 1 explosion out here. But here he is against a New Orleans defense that's middle of the road against opposing wide receivers. He's on the field leading all Bills wide receivers in snaps played and target share. So if Josh Allen makes some plays through the air, then it's not out of the realm of possibility that Coleman sees a bump in production. Maybe not what he saw in week 1, but definitely an improvement on what he had seen in weeks 2 and 3. Moving on to the next matchup here, we got the Philadelphia Eagles against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And let's talk Tampa Bay wide receiver Sterling Shepard. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 62. Now, Chris Godwin very well might be active this week, but it's hard to rely on a player coming off a long absence like the one Godwin had, whether it's, conditioning, performance, all of the above. So I expect Shepard to see a sizable role this week against a Philly defense that's middle of the road against wide receivers the last 3 weeks. So I could see a wide receiver 3 type day here from Shepard this week in the expanded role. And staying with the wide receiver position, let's talk about the Washington Commanders against the Atlanta Falcons. And let's look to Atlanta wide receiver Darnell Mooney, ECR PPR wide receiver 43. We talked about Mooney in the waiver show on Tuesday. He missed week 1 with a shoulder injury that he suffered in camp. But the last 2 weeks, he has played the most snaps of the position and has either matched or exceeded Drake London in targets the last 2 weeks. So Mooney, again, everyone looks at the Penix performance last week, but you're looking at a situation where Penix is at home. He's still a young quarterback. He's making his 7th start in the NFL, right? So, you know, I'm willing to look at last week against Carolina as an anomaly here. And let's see what happens against Washington at home. And I think Darnell Mooney could be a benefactor of that. Moving on to the next game here, we've got the Los Angeles Chargers against the New York Giants. And look, I'm not going to talk Jackson Dart, although I'm very intrigued to see how Jackson Dart does against this Chargers defense, because there's no BS in it, right? The Chargers are a legitimate defense. And, I think I said on the waiver show, New Orleans would probably be the place where I would expect to see him. But that game's on the road. And then after that, you go to Philly, or you have a matchup against Philly, then Denver, then Philly. So the way the Giants saw it is like, hey, let's get this guy in now, right? Get the reps now. And the Chargers is a tough test. So I say all that to say I'm not going to talk about Jackson Dart, but I definitely am intrigued to see how it works out this week against the Chargers. But let's talk about another rookie in Los Angeles Chargers tight end, Aronde Gadsden. He's the ECR PPR tight end 30. That name, the last name specifically messes me up. My brain is like, how do we say that? Like, how do you say the D and then you say an S and then you say a D really quick? Like, anyway, I digress. Another guy we talked about on the waiver show, in Aronde Gadsden, only played 25% of the snaps, yet managed to see 7 targets. And if he's going to see 25% of the snaps again, that would make him a risky play. But Harbaugh came out and said that Gadsden earned more playing time. So, I mean, he said a lot more than that, as Jim Harbaugh likes to, but essentially that's what he was saying, that he had earned more playing time, earned, an opportunity to move further up the depth chart. So if those things are true, then we could anticipate a more stable floor here against the New York Giants defense, allowing the 11th most PPR points to the tight end position over their last 3 games. Moving on to the next matchup here between the Tennessee Titans and the Houston Texans. And let's talk rookie running back for Houston, Woody Marks. He's the ECR PPR running back 37. Now, for those in need of help at the running back position, we've been talking about Woody Marks the last couple of weeks. And you're probably wondering whether you can play him or not. Well, his snap and touches have been trending up the last couple of weeks. If this continues this week in a great matchup against a Tennessee defense, allowing the 3rd most PPR points to the position the last 3 weeks, I'm comfortable taking the shot on Marks in week 4. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars against the San Francisco 49ers. And let's talk San Francisco wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, as he's the ECR PPR wide receiver 21. Look, if you're a member of the Patreon page, patreon.com/FFDX, and you've taken a look at the week 4 cheat sheet, this one should come as no surprise to you, because I have Ricky Pearsall ranked in my top 10 wide receivers in PPR leagues this week, and is facing off against the Jacksonville defense, allowing the 6th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers, right? So love Ricky Pearsall this week. Might even talk about him a little bit later, but back to the cheat sheet. If you haven't already, make sure you sign up for the Patreon page at patreon.com/FFDX. It's going to be completely free to access the cheat sheet. All you got to do is join as a member, access the free cheat sheet, and that cheat sheet has matchups, right? Highlights which matchups are the best matchups or the worst matchups for a particular position, and how teams are performing against those positions over the last 3 weeks. Waiver wire notes. How much fab should you spend? What range of fab should you spend? Some blurbs about each player. The top 3 at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. My top 10 rankings for PPR leagues for going into week 4. And then, as we move forward, you get some utilization trends in there as well, right? So, um, you know, again, absolutely free, doesn't cost you anything. All you got to do is sign up, patreon.com/FFDX. The link is also in the show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, go ahead and click those show notes and join the Patreon. So moving on to the next matchup here, we got the Indianapolis Colts against the Los Angeles Rams. And let's talk Indianapolis wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 29. And Pittman is having a resurgence so far to the start of the year. He's a wide receiver 12 right now in PPR points per game. Most snaps at the position on the team, second on the team in target share, behind only Tyler Warren. And he's facing off against the LA Rams defense that's allowing the 12th most PPR points to the position over the last 3 weeks. Moving on to the next matchup, the Chicago Bears against the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's talk Las Vegas quarterback Geno Smith. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 13. Now, if you've been listening since week 1, you know that I'm bullish on Geno Smith this year, and he's set to face off against the Chicago defense, allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback position over the last 3 weeks. Love this spot here for him. And, let's give our guy a vote of confidence here. Las Vegas wide receiver Trey Tucker. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 46. Also giving my vote of confidence here to the guy. So he's set to face off against a Chicago defense, allowing the 4th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers in the last 3 weeks. He's playing more than 92% of the snaps and running 92% of the routes. So his role is very much here and pairs perfectly with a very good deep ball passer in Geno Smith and an aggressive play caller in Chip Kelly. Now, moving on to Kansas City wide receiver Tyquan Thornton. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 60. Now, Xavier Worthy is expected to return in some capacity this week, and that's still to be determined to see what the usage looks like coming off a shoulder injury. But like I said on the waiver show, I think Thornton has earned the right to be on the field for a Kansas City offense in need of playmakers. And the matchup is good, with Baltimore allowing the 11th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers the last 3 weeks. So I think Thornton, again, has earned that right to be on the field, and wouldn't be surprised to see him continue to utilize that, to be used in that offense that is sorely in need of producing offense. All right, let's move on to the next game, and let's talk Green Bay Packers versus Dallas Cowboys. And let's talk Green Bay wide receiver Matthew Golden, as he is the ECR PPR wide receiver 41. Okay, it's been a while since we talked about Golden, but the injury to Jaden Reed, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Golden sees an expanded role. Had four catches for 4 targets for 52 receiving yards in week 3. This week, he's set to face off against a Dallas defense, allowing the most PPR points to the position the last 3 weeks. So I would expect Golden to make an impact in week 4. Moving on to the next game, the first of a Monday night doubleheader. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just going to complain about Monday night doubleheaders again, right? Like, I live on the East Coast. I'm not a huge fan of the Monday night doubleheaders. I wasn't a fan of the 7 p.m. to 7 p.m. kickoff and then the 10 p.m. kickoff. I could deal with the 6:15 and the 6:15 and 8:15, the staggered kickoff. I can deal with that. I could put the game on 2 different TVs. That's okay, right? And sometimes in that situation, maybe one game is better than the other, and you just focus on that game. I mean, I'm a Jets fan, so I'm probably just gonna be locked into the Jets game because I am loyal, maybe even to a fault. Anyway, let's talk New York Jets quarterback. We got the Jets against the Dolphins, and let's talk New York Jets quarterback Justin Fields. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 19. Now, this is assuming Fields clears concussion protocol. But I love this matchup here for him against the Miami defense, allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks and the most EPA per pass play. So uh, I think this is a nice spot here for Fields if he can return healthy in this one. So that being said, let's look at the other side of that game. Let's look at Miami quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 24. Now, talked about Tua in the waiver show, and he's definitely been struggling. But this Jets pass defense also has been struggling. They allow the fifth most EPA per pass play to opposing quarterbacks. So this is a nice spot for Tua. I also think it's a great spot for um, Devon Achane. He might catch a million passes in this game. Um, yeah, I have some thoughts. There's some things I was messing around with. It pertains to directional passing, and the Miami Dolphins pass. They throw the ball to the short right area of the field quite often. Um, and that's a large chunk of their play calls and a large chunk of their passing attack, which is kind of crazy. Um, but the Jets struggle mightily on passes to that area of the field. So, yeah. And the linebackers, they're injured. Again, Devon Achane might catch a million passes. I'm just saying. Wouldn't be surprised to see him catch literally a million passes. Not literally, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Tua Tagovailoa, big game for him. Nice spot for him. I think a nice spot for both quarterbacks. Um, I think this one's like a sneaky, high-scoring game. Now, in the last game, let's talk Cincinnati Bengals against the Denver Broncos, and let's talk Denver running back RJ Harvey, ECR PPR running back 39. Tyler Bede saw his usage decrease from week 2 to week 3. And while Harvey didn't greatly benefit from that, he definitely saw a bump in usage, specifically in the pass game, as he saw a 13% target share, which was up 8.4% from the week prior. But the Broncos, and with the Broncos being 7.5-point favorites here, the game script could lead to some more opportunities on the ground for the explosive rookie against a Cincinnati defense allowing the second most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. All right, that's it for the games and the matchups and the plays. We got a question here. Caleb White, appreciate the question. Just added Pickens and Keenan Allen, just dropped Devontae Smith and Jameson Williams. Seem to boomer bust. Think top 2 should be more consistent. Rest of season, thoughts? I'm assuming you play in a shallower league, whether it's 8, 10 team. But I do. So if you're starting 2 wide receivers, right, the way I like to think about it is I don't mind pairing a high variance guy with a consistent guy, right? And I think I agree with your assessment. Devontae Smith, Jameson Williams, those guys are like very boomer bust. Devontae Smith, obviously, I think his is more a function of the situation that he's in, right? Philadelphia doesn't have to throw the ball a whole ton. I mean, they had to throw the ball last week against the Rams because they were trailing for a big chunk of that game, and they had to make a comeback. And so Devontae Smith was seeing, pretty good usage in that situation. Jameson Williams, just by nature, I think just by the nature of the way he plays the position and his skill set, he's going to be boomer bust week in and week out. Where Pickens, I think, has some boomer bust to him. I think the Dallas offense is much better for him in terms of giving him a stable floor. But that floor, in half PPR leagues is going to be on the lower end. But that he'll still have like those ceiling games like he's had the last couple of weeks. Now Keenan Allen, I think, is very consistent, right? Because what do we look at when we're looking at consistency? It's about the volume that they're seeing, right? And Keenan Allen seeing a decent amount of volume in this offense. He is, the clear third receiver, but his target rate is still so high. If you look at it even from a target per route run perspective, he's ahead of Lad McConkey and Quentin Johnston in that metric. So when you look at it that way, I think what you've done here is really smart because you're looking at, hey, I don't like this boomer bust here, but I still like the fact that you have somewhat of a high variance guy in Pickens, because in my mind, like, I would love to have, when I'm putting my fantasy team together, I don't want two high variance guys, but also depending on the roles, don't want two like floor wide receivers, right? If I can mix and match them and have a high variance guy with a floor guy, so that when I'm not going to get a zero from my wide receivers that week, and if the ceiling guy happens to go off, I have a big week, and if both guys happen to go off, I have an even bigger week. So I do agree with your sentiment. I think Pickens, Keenan Allen are going to be more consistent going forward than Devontae Smith and Jameson Williams. I'd also make sure that Keenan Allen has history of injury and whatnot, being banged up. But if your league is this shallow that you can, add a George Pickens and a Keenan Allen and feel comfortable dropping a Devontae Smith and Jameson Williams, then I'm pretty sure that God forbid one of these guys goes down with an injury, you'll be able to go to waivers and pick up somebody to stick in your starting lineup. But good thinking there, Caleb, and appreciate the question. And that's just a reminder, y'all, if y'all ever have questions, definitely feel free to throw them in the chat. If you're watching live on YouTube or Twitch or X, don't hesitate to throw those questions in the chat. Now, let's move on to that money time, those starts of the week. And, week 3 was okay. Actually, it was pretty solid. Caleb says, appreciate it, man. Thanks. Keep it up. You're really knowledgeable. Current wide receivers are Chase, Adams, and Dunze. Oh, yeah, bro, you're crushing it. Absolutely crushing it. Yeah, no, that's a great receiving core. Again, I mean, I'm sure, like I said, it's probably a shallower league, but there's, a lot of people are going to have good teams, but I like this 3 right here. And then you're adding Pickens and Keenan Allen. Great spot here. All right, back to the starts of the week. Appreciate you, Caleb. Back to the starts of the week. Last week, Dak Prescott finished as the quarterback 21, Jordan Mason, the running back 7, Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 11, and Jon Johnson, the tight end 9. So solid week outside of the quarterback. Let's see if we can repeat that this week. And starting with the quarterback position, let's talk Jordan Love against Dallas. Now, I love this spot for Love, pun intended. Dallas has allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks over the last 3 weeks, and the second most EPA per pass play during that span as well. Meanwhile, Love ranks 6th in EPA per dropback. So this is a perfect spot for Jordan Love against a struggling Dallas defense. Expect him to deliver this week. I know all the attention will be on Micah Parsons, but this passing attack for Green Bay is in a great spot, which is why I love Matthew Golden this week. And actually, if you're in a pinch and you need help, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, they're also in play here because the matchup is that good. Now, moving on to the running back position, let's look at LA Chargers running back Omarion Hampton versus the New York Giants. Now, look, the rookie's heating up and had a near 25-point fantasy performance last week in PPR leagues. Obviously, we know the injury to Najee Harris, and that's unfortunate. But that led to and will continue to lead to Omarion Hampton being, a workhorse in this backfield. And he's now getting a Giants defense that's allowed the 5th most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. Big opportunity here for Hampton to keep rolling here. Now, my wide receiver start of the week, I alluded to it earlier, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. San Francisco wide receiver Ricky Pearsall against the Jacksonville Jags. Pearsall coming off an 11 target game and now gets the Jacksonville defense giving up the sixth most PPR points to wide receivers over their last 3 weeks. With Brock Purdy back, volume should stay strong here for Ricky Pearsall. Now, next up at the tight end position, let's talk Dallas tight end Jake Ferguson against Green Bay. Now, with CeeDee Lamb sidelined most of last week, Ferguson saw 14 targets, 26 over his last 2 games, with at least 78 receiving yards in each game. And now he faces off against a Packers defense, allowing the sixth most PPR points per game to the tight end position. Start Ferguson with confidence this week. Should be a big day for him. All right, y'all. That is all I have. Make sure you are tapped in. Make sure you're commenting, liking, subscribing, all that fun stuff. And make sure you go check out that Patreon page. Absolutely free to join as a member again. So good luck this weekend, y'all. Really appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch and listen. And we'll be back on Tuesday with the Waiver Show, 7 a.m. Eastern. We'll catch y'all later. Peace.